Today, I'm bringing you 5 Dynasty players that I personally believe no one in the community is currently talking about. Some players that I believe are being overlooked, undervalued, uh, just being swept underneath the rug going into this 2024 season. I think we need to bring a revitalization to these guys. We need to show them some love. So once again, 5 Dynasty players, some hidden gems, if you will, that no one is talking about in the Dynasty community. Let's get straight into it. All right, my first player that I do believe a lot of the fantasy communities is brushing underneath the rug currently is Christian Kirk, a guy that I've loved coming into the 2023 season based off of his value. And let's go back to the 2023 season. What was the biggest talk around the Jacksonville Jaguars and Christian Kirk? It was Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley was coming off of that 2-year hiatus, not playing football, being suspended for the year, coming into the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a lot of the fantasy community thought that he was going to be, I would say, a top 12 wide receiver. He, in redraft leagues, he was getting drafts, actually. He was getting pushed up from middle of the second round to the late second round. And I was saying, hey, guys, I think Christian Kirk is a better value. Not to my own horn, to be completely honest. Like, I'm just being honest. This is why I was saying you can go watch all the old videos back. I was saying Christian Kirk is a better value, getting him at round 6, 7, maybe even the 8th round if you could potentially get him there. Because everyone thought that they were just going to automatically click with Trevor Lawrence, this generational talent with Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley, who has been a top 5, top 8 wide receiver in the past, not only by himself, but beside one of the best wide receivers at the time with Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley should easily pick up where he left off. Clearly, that was not the case. But Christian Kirk, coming into the 2023 season, in my opinion, was one of the best values, but unfortunately, he did miss the last 5 games of the season. 57 receptions, 85 targets, just over 780 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging a 12.5 fantasy points per game. He did finish wide receiver 47. Now you think of, okay, what did Calvin Ridley finish? What did he do? When you look at everything together, Calvin Ridley finished as a wide receiver 18, but the fantasy points per game was not different. Christian Kirk, once again, finished as a wide receiver 47. He was averaging 12.5 fantasy points per game throughout, weeks 1 to 12 while he was healthy. Once again, 12.5 fantasy points per game for Christian Kirk. Calvin Ridley, 13.5. There was only a 1-point difference in somebody that you might have drafted in the mid to late second round of your redraft leagues, where I was getting Christian Kirk round was sixth round or later. If Kirk did not miss the last 5 games of the season, he would have finished as the wide receiver 21, averaging 13.3 fantasy points per game. Once again, Calvin Ridley was averaging 13.5 fantasy points per game. So a 0.2 of a difference there. And Kirk was clearly the better value. And you can see it here. I kind of broke it down here for you here. Weeks 1 to 12, when Christian Kirk was healthy, and I took out week 13 because he really only played that one snap where he caught that 20+ yard catch, and then he was injured. He got that hamstring injury and he was out for the season after that week. Christian Kirk, more receptions, more targets, more yards. Calvin really did have him on the touchdowns from weeks 1 to 12. The wide receiver finished wide receiver 23 for Christian Kirk versus Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 21 in the points per game. Once again, a 0.2 of a difference in favor of Calvin Ridley. There's not that big of a difference there. And I'll be completely honest with you. That's nothing to do with Calvin Ridley or Trevor Lawrence or anything. I just think that the opportunity and the way this offense runs, in my personal opinion, is through the slot and the tight end position. It's through Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, who were eating absolute targets coming into this past year. Now, one of the biggest question marks and arguments now in the 2024 season is that the Jacksonville Jaguars have added some new people. Gabe Davis does sign a big contract extension. He comes in maybe replacing Calvin Ridley, or the Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially be drafting another wide receiver with their pick. Now, we've seen a lot of mock draft where, Brian Thomas Jr. goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's just use him as an example. He's my wide receiver 4 in the 2024 class. If he does come in to this team, This doesn't change Christian Kirk's value. Well, in my perspective, if anything, I think the community is going to drop Christian Kirk even more, where you can get him at a better price. Because no disrespect to Brian Thomas Jr., who I love coming out of this class, but we know at the absolute peak of Calvin Ridley's prime, and even last year, we can all agree, correct me if I'm wrong, I will personally say that I do believe Calvin Ridley is a better talent when he was coming out of college and now as a 29-year-old wide receiver than Brian Thomas is right now. That's my personal opinion. And I have a lot of high hopes for Brian Thomas Jr., okay? I'm not necessarily sure things are automatically going to switch for Trevor Lawrence if he gets a Brian Thomas Jr., if he gets an Adonai Mitchell, if he gets insert wide receiver that's going to be going in the second half of the first round of the 2024 draft. Christian Kirk plays a huge part in this offense. In my personal opinion, I believe is being overlooked in the fantasy community. Now, the best price you can see at the moment, he's currently ranked as a 203. If you were to do a pick for the 2024 draft, the 203 or the 204 or later will probably be the best bet. Now, I'll be honest with you. As much as I love Christian Kirk and I bring him here right now, I would want to keep the 203 and the 204. If I can get the 2 or 5 or later for Christian Kirk, who I believe has just came off 2 years removed from finishing as a top 12 wide receiver with Trevor Lawrence, that's exactly who I would want. Now, you also have some other pivot options if you wanted to trade away someone like a Terry McLaurin, a Hollywood Brown, a Calvin Ridley, or even a Chris Godwin. And some of these names, these are all starting points, but some of these names you could potentially get more in return. I can imagine the way Hollywood Brown's name is being circulated right now with Patrick Mahomes. Can I get Christian Kirk and maybe an early second in return for Hollywood Brown? What about Calvin Ridley, who gets a 33-year contract extension, who technically gets a worse quarterback? Can I get a little bit more in return if I were to be getting Christian Kirk and something else and sending Calvin Ridley? Christian Kirk is my first getting swept hidden gem player on my list. All right, my second player on this list, same first name, different last name. That is Christian Watson. Yes, no one is talking about Christian Watson. Why? It's because everyone has their eyes on everyone else, which is fair. It is fair because at the moment, this offense is pretty stacked. You think of Jaden Reed, who just had a phenomenal breakout year in his rookie year. Jordan Love, who's finally coming out and, being released to the wild in the NFL, and he has finished and looks like he's going to be a phenomenal quarterback in the NFL. Dontavion Wicks, who is a sleeper that a lot of people are loving, saying that he can be taking a lot of opportunity away from everyone in this offense. Romeo Doubs, who had a decent year as well. Very underrated, more touchdown dependent. They also just added Josh Jacobs. I mean, a man who has easily finished in the past finished as the RB1, who has gotten opportunity in the air. Luke Musgrave, who's taken his second year leap as well. Christian Watson. But what happens with Christian Watson? He gets forgotten. Misses 8 out of 7 games this past year. And what is the biggest thing that you are saying right now? I don't want Christian Watson. He's injured. He's injury prone. Those hamstrings, they don't last him. Right? Like, I get it. Now, if he was on the field, because Zach and I have been saying this the whole time, right? And if you've been watching our videos, like I said, that wide receiver video rankings that we just released, Zach does bring up a good point. If you knew at this moment Christian Watson would play all 17 games, where would you have him ranked? Because we've seen the success with Christian Watson. Right now, to be fair, like I said before, he was struggling with injuries, missed 8 out of 17 games, and he wasn't 100% at all for even more than half of those games. I would say 5 of those games he wasn't 100% until the second half of the season, until he got hurt again. Okay, keep in mind also that Jordan Love wasn't clicking until the second half of the season. I would say maybe after week 10, week 9, that's when Jordan Love really was getting his feet underneath him, and you saw the Packers getting into that win streak in the second half of the season. When you really understand what was happening in this offense and how Jordan Love was clicking, how Jaden Reed was breaking out, how the offense was really humming at all cylinders. When Christian Watson was on the field at 100%, he was getting significant amount of opportunity. Weeks 11 to 13, weeks 11 to 13, when Jordan Love finally got clicked into this offense and when Christian Watson was officially, in my opinion, 100%, this is what we saw. Week 11, 10.2 fantasy points versus the Chargers. Week 12, over 20 fantasy points versus the Lions. Week 13, where they played the Kansas City Chiefs, 27.6 fantasy points per game against the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. That is Christian Watson for you. Now, you're probably worried and saying, yeah, but Jaden Reed is taking opportunities away from him because of his breakout. No, I think it's the opposite. Christian Watson is going to be taking away opportunities from Jaden Reed. Okay? And look, it may not be by a lot. It may be minuscule in your eyes, but as you can see here, there's a graphic. The in split where Jaden Reed was where Christian Watson was in the game and Christian Watson was in the game and Jaden Reed was out of the game. Like I said, they missed 8 games. This is not including the bye week, okay? In split with Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. If you don't understand this graphic, in split meaning the games that Christian Watson played in with Jaden Reed. 11.3 fantasy points per game with Christian Watson. Games without Christian Watson, the 7 games that he missed this past year, 16.4 fantasy points in favor of Jaden Reed. So if anything, Christian Watson is taking opportunities away from Jaden Reed, but Jaden Reed is still getting his by getting over 11 fantasy points per game. You still hope that's more, but still, that is some good opportunity for someone like a Jaden Reed and Christian Watson to both eat in this offense. At the moment, Christian Watson's value is not necessarily where you'll probably be comfortable paying. It's really similar to someone like a Christian Kirk, where it's an early second round pick. I'm not necessarily sure anyone would want to send an early second round pick for Christian Watson right now because of the question marks with the hamstring injury. Where does he fit into this offense with all these weapons? I understand. He's currently valued at the 203 to the 204 in the 2024 draft. Now, if you can get him for anything later than the 205, I'd be willing and interested, or potentially pivot options going into this year. So Christian Kirk is my next player. Before I get into my next player, guys, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here at DynastyLand. All you have to do is use our promo code LAND and you unlock so much. The fantasy hotline, the team reviews, our rankings, our scouting report, and so much more. Here's a little sneak peek of version 1 of our scouting report. We're currently on version 3. If you were to sign up, you get our instant version 3. Once again, using promo code LAND at flockfantasy.com. Once again, that's all you have to do is support. We do so much for you guys, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Let's get straight into my next player. All right, let's go to the running back position here. Someone that's also getting swept underneath the rug that I personally believe is a phenomenal value for somebody that's maybe in a win now situation. Joe Money Bag Mixon. Yes. At first, when Joe gets picked up by the Texans, only gets picked up, gets a 1-year deal. Then he gets the contract extension for the Houston Texans, which is phenomenal because the future opportunities that you can think of in this offense is great. Devin Singletary is gone. He's now a New York Giant. He leaves behind 216 attempts, 38 targets in the air. But what is Joe Mixon known for? His goal line opportunities. And now Dameon Pierce is there, yes. Devin Singletary is gone, yes. But the total goal line opportunities that this offense is going to be seeing, red zone opportunities for Joe Mixon, is pretty phenomenal here. And I kind of broke it down for you. I looked inside the 20, the 10, and the 5-yard line with the opportunities of Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce. You can see here, inside the 20-yard line, Devin Singletary had 32 attempts inside the 20-yard line. Attempts are handoffs. Run plays within the 20-yard line. 17 attempts inside the 10-yard line. And 7 attempts inside the 5-yard line. That is 56 attempts in total throughout this year. Now you look at Dameon Pierce's attempts within the 20, the 10, and the 5. 22 attempts in the 20-yard line, 14 attempts in the 10-yard line, and 8 attempts in the 5-yard line. That is 44 attempts for Dameon Pierce. Oddly enough, that adds up to 100 attempts in total. Not saying that's all going to Joe Mixon. I do believe they're bringing somebody else in the NFL draft. But that is 100 attempts in total that is left vacant. And I do believe Joe Mixon, who has had over 50 attempts in the 20, the 50, the 20, the 10, and the 5-yard line with the Cincinnati Bengals, can easily pick that up, no question. If you look back at those opportunities that Dameon Pierce got at the goal line opportunities, he was getting stuffed. You get so pissed because Devin Singletary would run down, will take the Texans down the field, get all those passing opportunities. Maybe you had Devin Singletary, and then Dameon Pierce comes in and tries to punch it in, and he just couldn't get it done. Joe Mixon is completely different. Joe Mixon knows how to punch it in the end zone. Joe Mixon knows how to finish. Pause. But you get what I'm saying here, right? Joe Moneybags, who knows how to handle the workload in the red zone, is exactly what you can see. In this offense, you're saying, well, this offense is different. It's not a high-powering offense. C.J. Stroud and the Texans was one of the high-powered offense, one of the highest-scoring offenses in the NFL this past year, and that was in C.J. Stroud's rookie year. Not only that, the offensive line gets better for Joe Mixon with the Houston Texans. According to PFF, the Texans O-line is top 15, where the Bengals were ranked 26th amongst the NFL this past year. Joe Mixon has been a phenomenal value, and not too many people are talking about him right now because of this opportunity. I agree. They're going to bring in somebody else to relieve him. Maybe that's a Bucky Irving. Maybe that's an Aldrick Estime, a bigger back. Maybe it's just a Marshawn, somebody that's going to take opportunity away from Joe Mixon. Yes, that's going to happen. But Joe Mixon is going to score touchdowns like he always does. Joe Mixon is going to have these breakout games where it might be skewed, but still he's going to be finishing, in my personal opinion, as a top 10 running back like he has for the past couple of years. So Joe Mixon is my next player getting swept under the rug. All right, my fourth player that I do believe a lot of the fantasy community is kind of forgetting right now, and I do believe his value could potentially be rising depending on what they do in the NFL draft. That is Michael Mayer at the tight end position here. And we've seen Michael Mayer not have a breakout or anything, but have a little bit of consistency and inconsistency this past year in his rookie year. He does fall into the second round, which we all thought he was going to be a first-round pick in the 2023 NFL draft. Doesn't get the draft capital that we expected, but definitely lands in an opportunity where we can see him flourish, right? Because Darren Waller is not there. He steps in. He's easily going to be the number one tight end in this offense. And we've seen the success in Notre Dame for Michael Mayer. Now, one of my biggest, takes here is the usage that we've seen from past tight ends in Luke Getsky's offense. Specifically, the past couple years with the Chicago Bears and how he was utilizing Cole Kmet. Now, Cole Kmet is somebody that, if you guys have been following the channel, you guys know that I absolutely love. This past year, he was second amongst in targets for the Chicago Bears behind DJ Moore. He finished as a top 8 tight end this past year, averaging 10.7 fantasy points per game at the tight end position. I would personally say Michael Mayer is a better talent than Cole Kmet, but Cole Kmet so far has been proving that he can be this guy for the Chicago Bears, and I think Michael Mayer can do that and more. That was only this year. 2022, Cole Kmet also finished as a tight end 8. Now, didn't have a higher fantasy finish, only averaged 8.7 fantasy points per game, but he led that team. If I'm not mistaken, he was second in receptions behind Darnell Mooney that year in 2022. too, because DJ Moore wasn't on the team at the time, and there was no one there for Justin Fields, and that was with Justin Fields. Now, I did say in the beginning of this take that depends on what the Las Vegas Raiders do. I know they signed Gardner Minshew. What happens if they do go out and get a Bo Nix? What happens if they go out and get a Michael Penix? What if they are in one of these teams that do go out and get J.J. McCarthy? They can easily drop Aiden O'Connell. They can easily keep 3 quarterbacks and have any of these 3 quarterbacks have success. And all these guys have had somewhat of a glimpse, just a little bit minuscule success with tight ends. Gardner Minshew with Dallas Goedert with the Philadelphia Eagles. Aiden O'Connell, who we saw this past year with glimmers and sprinkles of success and targets for Michael Mayer, right? And yes, one of these rookie quarterbacks, whether it's JJ or Michael Penix, I guess technically we haven't seen the success of the tight end position, but we've seen the success of them spreading the ball around in an offense, and that's exactly what's exciting here. Year 2 bump is always something exciting for a tight end position coming into the 2024 season, and we have to remember Sam Laporta's year has 100% skewed the expectation for the tight end position. It's kind of like Justin Herbert when he came into that COVID year where he didn't have the typical quarterback off season, rookie season coming in, and then he finishes and excels and takes the Chargers to the next level. It's skewed now with Sam Laporta, and that's unfortunate. But the second year breakout here with the team that has Devontae Adams, that has Jacoby Myers, that got rid of Josh Jacobs here, who could potentially get another quarterback in this roster, can easily step into an opportunity going into the 2024 season. So Michael Mayer is my next guy getting swept underneath the rug. All right, and last but not least, at the quarterback position, and before I even tell you who this is, take everything that's happened off the field out of it. Okay, I know a lot of people don't like it, and I think me, just by saying that, you know who it is. DeShaun Watson. Yes, DeShaun Watson. I know a lot of people don't like him, but we have to look at what he did this past year, okay? This past year, he was set back with injuries, specifically to one of the most important parts for a quarterback. That was his throwing arm. Normally, you see a leg injury, maybe a hamstring injury. It was his rotator cuff on his throwing arm, the most important part for a quarterback, and the injuries really set him back. He missed 9 out of 17 games this past year, and it was very up and down season. But one thing I did want to do was really break down the 3 consistent games that he has played this past year, and that was from weeks 1 to 3. Okay, because every other week he played 1 game, missed 2, and then he would play another 2. This is the longest stretch of consistency that we saw with DeShaun Watson in 2023 with the Cleveland Browns. You can see here weeks 1, 22.7 fantasy points where he finished as a QB5. Okay, that's not bad coming off of that year he didn't play. Week 2, 13.6 fantasy points. He finished as a QB27. Okay, that's not the best outcome for a quarterback whatsoever in second week of the NFL there. Week 3, 21.2 fantasy points, and that was QB10 finish. If you were to take the first 3 weeks and essentially extrapolate that for a 17-game season, and I know a lot of people don't like that, it's not the perfect science, he would have finished as a QB4. Okay, and you said, okay, that's ahead of Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud. That was with a bad week where he finishes as a QB27. What if I were to average all the games that he played, even with the gaps in between, right? The games that he didn't play, the game that he had a negative finish. If you don't remember, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Colts. I think he threw one of the first couple plays, he throws a pick. And he gets injured on that play, and he finishes with negative points. If I were to extrapolate those 6 games, he would have finished as a QB9. Once again, it's not a perfect science. But if you're telling me that someone who had a negative game, right, who finished as a QB27 in week 2, who has had success and has had a top 5 finish in his career multiple years in a row, whose weapons get better, in my personal opinion, because I do believe the talent's still there. And Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb is there, Jerome Ford. Do they get another weapon, whether at the running back position or wide receiver position? I mean, DeShaun Watson is getting swept underneath the rug, and I get it. It's because of the off-the-field issues, the morals for all these fantasy players. I get it. For me, I like to set that aside. It's just fantasy. Maybe I got a $200 league. If I can win, I'm going to win. I'm drafting DeShaun Watson if he wins. I guarantee you, correct me if I'm wrong, if DeShaun Watson was a top 5 consistent quarterback again, I think a lot of people's, tune would change after the 2024 season. So, like when someone's down bad, you keep kicking them down. When someone's up and doing great, that's when people want that person on the team. So DeShaun Watson, I do believe, is getting swept underneath the rug, and you can't take that for granted. Maybe you could take advantage of it. Somebody doesn't want him on his team. What is the price for DeShaun Watson? And I think that is the most interesting thing when you think of going into this year. An early second-round pick in the 2024 draft class, a 202 for DeShaun Watson would be interesting if you are in need of a quarterback. But at the same time, I want to keep my second-round picks because of that talent that is there. This is a lot of projection, but the stats say that he still would have been a top 10 finish, even missing all those games, right? Or even with all those gap between those games, with those negative games in that 6-7 games that he did miss last year. So if I were you, DeShaun Watson is somebody I'm going to be interested in trying to see, hey, what's that value looking like for you? Is that an early second? Is that a mid-second? You want to swap? Maybe, do you want to swap for somebody that's a better person in fantasy and maybe in real life, but maybe not as good as a fantasy player? I 100% would. So those are my guys: DeShaun Watson, Michael Mayer, Christian Kirk, Christian Watson. Those are my 5 guys that I'm going. And Joe Mixon, by the way. I did forget Joe Moneybag Mixon. My 5 players that I do believe no one is talking about currently right now that you can potentially get at a decent price here. Guys, like, comment, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.